Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 fastest sports cars in Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of lap time. This is not in terms of top speed. So anyway guys, we're going to get into it. We're going to start off with number 10. Alright guys, starting off with number 10, we of course have the Elegy RH8. Yes, the Elegy RH8 that you can get for free is the 10th fastest sports car in Grand Theft Auto Online. The Elegy is a pretty decent vehicle, especially to get for free. Obviously, this thing is based off of a Nissan GTR. I probably don't even need to say that, but I already did, so there you go. The Elegy RH8 used to be my go-to race car in this game. Me and my friends used to do some pretty competitive racing a few years ago, and when we did it, the RH8 was our sports car of choice. This thing was very dominant for a long time. And even today, it is still in the top 10, which goes to show just how good this thing once was. And obviously, how good it still is. The RH8 handles really well, accelerates really well. It is four-wheel drive, so you can, of course, get pretty good traction in the corners and a pretty good launch out of going into a slow corner. Overall, the RH8 is definitely a car that I would recommend picking up because it's literally free. Why wouldn't you have one of these things? It's an awesome car, and potentially if you're playing against people that don't have thumbs, you could maybe win some sports car races with this thing. Anyway guys, that is it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Alright guys, next up at number 9 we have the Ocelot Jugular. Now the Jugular is one of my favorite cars in this game. It's definitely one of the best cars to cruise around with friends in because it is of course a 4-door. Also, it is one of the best sounding cars in all of Grand Theft Auto Online. Thing literally sounds insane. It's so good. A fun fact about the Ocelot Jugular is that it is actually the fastest 4-doored vehicle in all of Grand Theft Auto Online, not in terms of top speed of course, but around a track. So that's pretty cool. The Jugular accelerates really well. It has a pretty decent top speed. The only thing that I can really complain about is the handling of this thing. It's not bad by any means, don't get me wrong, but the tail end of it does tend to slide out while the front tends to understeer. It's kind of a weird balance. If you get the car at the right angle, at the right speed, it will be absolutely fine, but occasionally you will have to deal with some understeer or occasionally some oversteer as well. Just something to be aware of if you do plan on buying this car. I would recommend this one as well. However, this one is a lot more money than the Elegy, so you might want to make sure that you have some extra money lying around if you want to buy this thing. Anyway guys, that is it for the Ocelot Jugular at number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Alright guys, next up at number 8, we of course have the ENUS Paragon R. Now the Paragon R is based off of a Bentley Continental GT Super Sport, and it is pretty much as close as they could get without copyright infringing. So respect to Rockstar Games for doing that. In terms of how this thing performs though, it is of course the 8th fastest supercar in the entire game around a track. The handling on the Paragon R is very good. It is one of the vehicle's best features in my opinion. The only problem with the handling is, again, similar to the Ocelot Jugular, it can understeer a little bit occasionally, which is really annoying, but for the most part, it is pretty manageable and won't understeer that badly for you. As far as the acceleration and the top speed go, both are very good. The acceleration is extremely good, I would say. This thing literally feels so fast all the time. It's a crazy car, really. Couple that with the pretty good handling and the decent top speed, and you have a really decent race car here. The Paragon R is definitely a car that I would recommend picking up. It has so many uses in this game, in my opinion. I absolutely love this thing, so I am a bit personally biased in saying that you should all buy this, but it is a really nice car. Overall, the Paragon is pretty sick. You can probably win some races with it if you're playing against a couple more thumbless people. But if you're not, you are probably not going to win many races with it, unfortunately, but it is still the 10th fastest car, so I would say this thing is more of a free mode cruiser, at least in my opinion. Anyway guys, let's move on to number 7. Alright guys, next up at number 7 we have the Weenie Sport. This thing is an absolute rocket. I love this car. I've only really picked it up recently, but in the time that I have owned it, it has become one of my favorite cars, and I can totally see why this thing is as good as it is. in the sports category. The acceleration is absolutely crazy, and the handling is by far this thing's best feature. It feels like it's absolutely stuck to the road, so you really don't lose traction in this thing. It also has insanely good brakes, which is another good feature about this thing, especially when it comes to racing. For a non-racing feature about this car, it also has extremely good customization that you can do to it. You can make this thing look however crazy you want to, or however tame you want to. It's a really unique car for that aspect. This thing is best suited within sports car races to be in rally races because it has really good suspension. There's a couple of stunt races in the game that actually have some off-road sections on them. I think one is called Zebra, if I remember correctly. This would be an absolutely fantastic car to use on that track because it will absolutely soak up all of the bumps on the off-road section on the track. Overall, the Weenie Sport is a solid vehicle. The only thing that this thing lacks is top speed, and it lacks it pretty heavily. However, the acceleration to get to its top speed is very good, and the handling is as well as the brakes. Anyway guys, overall the Weenie Sport is a very solid vehicle. I would highly recommend picking this thing up if you guys don't have one already. Let's move on to number 6. Alright guys, at number 6 we have a car that I never expected to be on this list until I started doing research for it. We have the Pfister Comet SR. Now the Comet SR is actually one of my favorite Comets in the entire game. I think it actually is my favorite Comet if I'm honest. And I was always a super big fan of this car, I just never realized just how fast it actually was. I always knew that it was a fast car, I always knew that it was a good car, but I didn't know that it was the 6th fastest sports car in the entire game, which is a pretty big honor for this thing. The original Comet is one of the slowest sports cars in the game, so seeing the SR be this high in the list is very good. Now, the Comet SR has extremely good cornering grip, which is probably its biggest benefit, although it does have really good acceleration and a pretty decent top speed as well. The Comet SR is definitely a car that I would recommend picking up if you are a fan of Porsches, because obviously it's based off of a 911. Now you can make this thing look like a 911 GT2 RS or a GT3 RS if you want to, or you can make it look like a pretty bare bones 911, which is really cool in my opinion. The Comet SR is a really good car, and I can totally see why it's this high on the list. I've been a fan of this thing for a long time, and I'm happy to find out that it's actually this good of a sports car. I would highly recommend picking this thing up if you guys don't have one already. It is really sick, and the cars ahead of this thing are not all that much faster. You may be able to actually win some races with the Comet SR if you really try. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for the Comet SR. We're gonna move on to number 5 now. Alright guys, at number 5 we have the overflawed immorgan. This thing is a really good vehicle, and it's a vehicle I didn't really expect to be on this list until I started doing research for it. I have driven the immorgan before several times, and I was honestly never that impressed with it. But this time when I bought the car, I was pretty impressed, I must say. The immorgan is a very quick car. The acceleration on this thing is very decent. Unfortunately, you cannot equip this thing with a turbo. However, there used to be a glitch where you could go on the Rockstar iFruit app on your actual phone and put a turbo on it, which would give it an extra boost in performance. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side of the tracks you're on, that glitch has now been patched, so you cannot do it anymore. Regardless of that though, the immorgan is still the 5th fastest sports car in all of Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of lap time, and I can totally see why. This thing's got crazy good acceleration and extremely good handling. This is definitely a car that you should probably pick up if you don't have one already. However, I am not going to personally recommend it because I don't love this thing. However, if you guys are immorgan fans, by all means, that is great. Respect to you. I personally am not the biggest fan of this car ever, but it is a pretty decent car, and I'm not one to deny facts. Here it is at its rightful position at number 5. Anyway guys, that is it for number 5. Let's move on to number 4. Alright guys, next up at number 4 we have the Vissunio. Now this is another car that I did not expect to be this high on the list, but I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. I've done a customization and review on the Neo before, and I was not impressed with this car whatsoever. I actually completely hated it, and I'm pretty sure I trash talked it pretty much the entire time that I was customizing it. Now, it is still a very ugly car in my opinion. However, On a racetrack, it is a formidable opponent, apparently. I can honestly not say that I have personally raced this vehicle. However, there are a lot of people that say that this thing is one of the best sports cars for racing in all of Grand Theft Auto Online. I personally do not see it at all. The handling on this vehicle is pretty much terrible as far as I can tell. However, that is just my opinion, I guess, because allegedly it's one of the fastest sports cars in the entire game. Not really sure how it works. Anyways, what I will say about this car is the acceleration is very, very good, and it does have a pretty decent top speed as well. I personally cannot stand the handling of this car. As you guys can see, I'm having a bit of trouble actually keeping it on the road here, which is unfortunate because I really want to like this car. I just don't know that I personally can. But hey, if you guys want to try it out, go right ahead. But I cannot say that I recommend this car, especially given what some of the cars just ahead of this thing actually are and what they are capable of, and I know they're capable of. I cannot suggest buying the Vissunio. It's not very good looking. It handles like a wet paper towel, in my opinion at least. It does have really good acceleration and a pretty good top speed, but that's really all this thing has going for it, in my opinion at least. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for the Vissunio. Let's move on to the next car. Alright guys, next up at number 3 we have the Itali RSX. And before the Itali RSX guys get triggered, I'm going to explain this all, why this thing is here and not at number 1, because I know that is a sore subject for you folks. Now, for some reason, because I acknowledge facts, people who drive the Itali RSX seem to absolutely hate me. I really, really like this car. I think it's a great looking car. I think it's a great performing car. It's not the fastest car in Grand Theft Auto Online in the sports category. It just isn't. I'm sorry if you don't like hearing that. It's literally just a fact. You might like the RSX, and as much as you like it, it's not technically the best sports car. Now, the Itali RSX is 4-wheel drive. It has extremely good handling, extremely good acceleration, and an extremely good top speed. The RSX is a fantastic car, and I 100% recommend picking it up just to have it in online. The RSX is one of my favorite looking cars in the entire game. I think that Rockstar absolutely killed it with this thing. I really have no complaints about this vehicle whatsoever. Overall, the RSX is definitely a car that I would recommend picking up. However, it is not a car that I recommend necessarily as being the fastest car for racing. If you want the fastest car for racing, wait until we get to number 1. Anyway guys, that is it for the Itali RSX at number 3. Alright guys, at number 2 we have the Ocelot Pariah. Now, before you get triggered and start writing your hate comment, hear me out again. The Pariah is the fastest top speed vehicle in the sports class in Grand Theft Auto Online. And it is one of the fastest top speed vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online. However, the Pariah is not the best for lap racing on most circuits. On certain circuits that have extremely long straightaways, this thing can occasionally get you a victory. I must recommend picking up a Pariah for the longer straightaway tracks in Grand Theft Auto Online. There are not many of them. In certain stunt races, there are pretty long straightaways, but on others, there just aren't. Now, the Pariah definitely does excel at going in a straight line. However, the handling of this vehicle and its turning ability is a different story. The Pariah does not handle terribly, do not get me wrong, it's not the worst ever. However, on a slower speed corner, this thing is rear wheel drive only, and the tail end does occasionally like to slide out. So you can lose control of this thing pretty easily. Obviously, on a circuit with a lot of corners and not a lot of straightaways, the Pariah is not going to do as well because it can't use its top speed that it has, and it is forced to use its handling that it has, which is not very good. So the Pariah on most circuits is a slower car than the vehicle that we have at number 1. I am a fan of the Pariah, before anyone thinks that I'm not. This thing is really, really good. It looks great. It's got some decent customization that you can do to it. Obviously, it has a crazy top speed and it has really good acceleration as well. However, the handling of the vehicle is not all that. However, with that being said, the handling is not that terrible. A lot of the time you will be fine with this car. However, most of the time you are going to be wishing that you were driving the car, which is at number 1. So anyway guys, without further ado, let's get into number 1. Alright guys, and the car at number 1 is of course the Itali GTO. The Itali GTO literally should be in the supercars category in this game. because it is just that fast. If you took the GTO into a supercars race, you would be keeping up with some of the fastest cars in the game, like the Progen Emerus and the Benefactor Krieger. This thing is literally so insane. As you guys can see just by me driving right here, I'm going pretty darn fast. Now, where the GTO excels is at acceleration and handling. The GTO handles extremely well, and it has a very unique suspension setup. For some reason, this car absolutely loves bumps, and if you know about curb racing in GTA Online, the GTO is extremely good at curb boosting. Even without curb boosting, just by a road being uneven, the GTO actually gains some degree of speed. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure the science behind it, I don't know why it's like this, but the GTO does gain speed by going over bumps. Absolutely no sense to me, but it does. The Italia GTO has won me an absurd amount of races in this game. It really has yet to fail me. If anything, I have failed it. This car is absolutely incredible. I recommend this more than any other car on this list, especially if you're trying to win races. However, regardless of that, I do recommend this thing more than any other vehicle on the list, just in general, even if you are not trying to win races. The GTO is an absolutely fantastic car. The handling is not for everybody. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like how this car handles, and that is fair enough. But what I will say is give this car a shot, and I almost guarantee you will not be disappointed. The Italia GTO is truly a very special vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online. Definitely pick one of these things up if you do not have one already. Alright boys, there you have it. That has been the top 10 fastest sports cars in all of Grand Theft Auto Online as far as lap races go. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.